everybody. This video is going to go over the PowerPoint on Chapter 1, Introduction to Writing in the Week 1 module. As the title of the chapter indicates, this lesson really is just an overview of writing and written communication in general. One of the things that the chapter points out is that, we communicate on a daily basis, practically all day. And during the day, during the course of any day, we make assertions, like we make a claim. Things like, I hate my job, or Cracker Barrel has great food at reasonable prices, or that exam was so unfair, or that doctor is so arrogant. And we make these claims in our casual conversations, and if we're having conversations with people who know us, or maybe who don't even know us all that well, they don't necessarily ask us to prove our points. You can say, I hate my job. And if that person is interested, and invested in you, then they might ask you to explain, but they're really just asking that because they care and they're interested and they just want to help you work through it. They're not necessarily saying, I don't believe you, or, I don't trust you, so prove it. Prove to me that your job is so horrible. However, when we're writing, especially in academic settings, your readers will expect you to give reasons for your statements. So if you were writing a paper on Cracker Barrel and explaining to the reader why Cracker Barrel is such a great restaurant, and you say it's because they have great food at reasonable prices, you can't just leave it at that. They're going to want some examples. They're going to want you to support those points. And that is one of the things that we will focus on throughout the term, is that the difference between talking and writing is that in writing, any idea that you advance has to be supported with specific reasons or details, right? We're going to look first, the first part of the term, at paragraphs. We're just going to start with that basic unit of writing, just a paragraph. We will work our way up towards a full essay as the term proceeds, but we're going to start just looking at paragraphs. So a paragraph it says that a paragraph is a short paper, about 150 to 200 words, but there's honestly no real word limit for a paragraph, as long as you're following the rules of paragraph development, which we will learn about. But there are some things about a paragraph that are kind of rules. And the first is that it usually consists of an opening point called a topic sentence, and then it's followed by a series of sentences that support that point. So, the evidence that supports the point of the paragraph consists of reasons and examples and details, anecdotes, personal experiences, facts, statistics, expert opinions. There are a variety of ways to support your point, but you have to have it. There has to be a point to that specific paragraph, and then there should be support for that point, right? The next slide asks you to take a look at the paragraph that's on page 4 of the textbook, talking about my job in the apple plant. And it asks you, what are the 3 reasons given and what examples and details were provided to back up those reasons? Well, what it's talking about is that paragraph, my job in the apple plant, or in an apple plant. The author starts it off by saying, when in an apple plant, or working in an apple plant, was the worst job I ever had. And then he goes on to give specific reasons for why it was the worst job, and then he gives examples of each reason. So his first reason why it was such an awful job, he says, first of all, the work was physically hard. That's his first reason, his first point of the sub point of the paragraph. So then he says, for 10 hours a night, I took cartons that rolled down a metal track and stacked them onto wooden skids in a tractor trailer. Each carton contained 25 pounds of bottled apple juice, and they came down the track almost nonstop. So that's his example of his first reason. And then he gives his second reason for why the job was so bad. The second bad feature of the job was the pay, right? So that's his second reason. And then he explains that a little bit further. I was getting the minimum wage at that time, $4.50 an hour, plus 50 cents extra for working the night shift. I had to work over 60 hours a week to get decent take-home pay. And then he moves on to his third reason. Finally, I hated the working conditions. So the working conditions are his third reason. And then he gives us examples of that. We were limited to two 10-minute breaks and an unpaid half hour for lunch. Most of my time was spent outside on the loading dock in near 0-degree temperatures. I was very lonely on the job because I had no interest in common with the other truck loaders. I felt this isolation especially when the production line shut down for the night and I spent 2 hours by myself cleaning the apple bats. So he gives a point at the very beginning of the paragraph. Working in an apple plant was the worst job I ever had. That is the focus of his paragraph. And then he supports that focus, that point, with three reasons or three sub points. The work was physically hard, the pay wasn't good, and he didn't like the working conditions. And for each of those three reasons, he gives us specific examples of each one. So the paragraph, any paragraph, a good paragraph, will have two essential parts to it. There are some other things that we'll talk about later on. But for now, we're going to say that a paragraph has two essential parts, the point and the support, right? Huge, huge elements of good paragraph writing. So we're going to be working on that. And, mastering the structure of a paragraph will make you a better writer. It strengthens your skills as a reader and a listener. And it's going to make you a stronger thinker. It's going to make you more organized in your thought process. So we're going to start with a basic paragraph. And you'll see that when we go to create an essay, you will have an easier time of doing that because you will understand what you have to do in each of the paragraphs that make up the essay. And then writing an essay won't seem quite so intimidating, right? Before you start writing anything though, whether it's a paragraph or an essay or even giving a presentation or a speech or writing an email or a memo, there's something that you need to do first, something that you need to think about, and it's what we call the rhetorical situation. I know it sounds really strange. If you think of the word rhetorical, it has the word rhetoric at its root. And, if anyone has ever even heard of the word rhetoric, we often have negative associations with that word. We think of it as either something that's really dry and boring, maybe even manipulative, because if you hear the word used in certain contexts, especially like in politics, it can be used to imply that the person using rhetoric is trying to be sneaky or manipulative. And then we also have what we call a rhetorical question, which is a question that isn't really supposed to be answered. It gets asked, but it just kind of, lingers out there. It's really more for us to think about, or it's asked to prove a point. It's not really supposed to be answered or discussed. But those are all, interpretations of the word or associations that we have with the word rhetoric based on different things within our society and culture. But if you really get to what rhetoric is, it's the art of persuasion and the art of communication. And so when we're looking at a rhetorical situation, we're looking at any situation that arises in which we are going to communicate something, whether it's verbal or written. And there is a context for that communication. Something has happened. We're trying to communicate to a specific person or group of people. We are trying to make a specific point. We're talking about a specific subject. We want the reader, the person we're communicating with, we want that person or that group of people to think a certain way or to agree with us, or we want them to act and do something, whatever the case may be. But communication doesn't happen in a vacuum. There are things that lead up to that moment when you decide that you're going to write something or give a speech on something or communicate in some way. So that's what we're talking about here with the rhetorical situation, is looking at those elements that are kind of already in place, that are happening before you even start writing. There's 5 elements to the rhetorical situation: topic, angle, purpose, audience, and tone. Those first 3, topic, angle, and purpose, are crucial to making sure that you have a good foundation for whatever it is that you are about to write or communicate. We're going to look at those first 3 first, and then we'll talk about the other 2 after that. So those first 3 elements of the rhetorical situation: topic, angle, and purpose. Topic, what am I writing about? And we're not just talking about a general subject. What is the specific focus of what you are writing about, right? So, for instance, going back to that paragraph on my job in an apple plant, it's not just, the topic isn't, previous jobs. The topic isn't the worst job ever. The topic is that working in an apple plant was the worst job he ever had. So it's the specific focus of the thing you're writing. That's the topic. The angle, what we're talking about here is, what are you bringing to the table that's different or unique? I'm sure we could search the internet, we could Google it, and there's probably 100 million things written out there on bad jobs, horrible jobs. So what are you going to bring to the table that's different, that's unique and fresh? Sometimes it's the angle is kind of built in for you. For instance, with that sample paragraph on working in an apple plant, what makes his experience, or what makes his topic unique, what makes his paragraph unique, is that it's based on his personal experience. So if it's based on your personal experience, then that kind of does make it a little unique. At the same time, though, it's not a guarantee. So for instance, if I told you that you needed to write an essay on one of the most significant moments in your life, a lot of us who have children, it would be, easily the birth of our first child, and that's fine. You could absolutely use that as your topic. However, how many people have written about that same moment? How are you going to make yours different? How are you going to make yours stand out? And that's not always an easy thing to accomplish. So if you're picking a topic that's pretty common, then you have a tougher job of making sure you have a good, strong angle, that you're bringing something fresh to the table. And then your purpose is, why am I writing? What do I want to happen as a result of this? What am I hoping the reader walks away with? Am I hoping to persuade them to believe a certain way? Am I hoping to get them to go out and do something? Am I wanting to make them laugh? What are you hoping to accomplish with the thing you're writing? That's your purpose. And if you don't have a purpose in mind before you start writing, your paper or your paragraph will seem unstable. Like it won't be grounded in anything. It will just maybe ramble, maybe just kind of circle around some important stuff, but never really land on anything substantial. Your purpose is really what drives everything else about the thing you're communicating. If you know your purpose, then you can make very specific and strategic decisions about what and how you write. The purpose is so important. The other two elements of the rhetorical situation are also important, but sometimes we don't have to think about them quite as much. So for instance, audience, that's the fourth element of the rhetorical situation. You do want to consider who your audience is. It's because it's not just me. It's not just your instructor. So when you're writing a paper for class, your audience is more than likely your peers as well, your classmates. But when we switch to other settings, when we're not necessarily talking about school, then your audience, you really do need to think about who your audience is. Are you writing an email at work? And who is that email being sent to? And do you work in a place where your superiors would have access to anything sent via email among employees? That's huge. You really do have to consider your audience before you start writing. Even like in a memo, right? If it's a speech or a presentation, who is your audience, right? And then the fifth element of the rhetorical situation is tone. Sometimes you'll hear this referred to as context as well, but I'm going to just focus on tone for right now. And tone, if you think about like your tone of voice when you speak, I could say the same sentence 3 different ways, same words, but use a different tone of voice each time, and it's going to mean something different each time. We understand how tone of voice can influence how people react to what you say or interpret what you say. It's true in writing as well. The tone you use in your writing is significant. And you have to make sure that you're using an appropriate tone, meaning, is it formal enough for the type of thing you're writing? But also, can you get away with being informal at times? And depending on your purpose, are you trying to persuade people? Then your tone is going to be one way. If you're trying to get people to act and do something, then your tone might be something else. If your purpose is to just make people laugh and entertain them, then your tone is going to be, again, something entirely different. But your tone has to do with the choices of words, like your word choice, because we have so many ways of expressing one single thought. And the words you choose all have associations with them. So word choice and how you put your sentences together, those are, and the language that you use, that all has to do with tone. So on slide 14, I gave you a little practice table, 6 sentences, and each one is written in a different tone. And you had 6 different types of tones to choose from to figure out which sentence went with which tone. And it's just a good little exercise. It's real simple. So the tone of item 1, if you were looking at it, is the sentimental one. This place may be shabby, but since both of my children were born while we lived here, it has a special place in my heart. So talking about that special place in my heart, that lets you know that we're using a sentimental tone. The apartment is not fancy, but it meets my needs. So that meets my needs in item number 2 shows that the writer is being tolerant and just accepting of the situation. It is what it is. Number 3, if only there were some decent jobs out there, I wouldn't be reduced to living in this miserable dump. Well, he sounds pretty bitter. Miserable dump. Item number 4, this place does need some repairs, but I'm sure the landlord will be making improvements sometime soon. Well, clearly, we are very optimistic and hopeful in that sentence. When we move away, we're planning to release 300 cockroaches and 2 mice so we can leave the place exactly as we found it. So, a little bit of humor there, right? And it's a 2-bedroom apartment that needs to be repainted and have the kitchen plumbing repaired. That's just matter of fact. Just the facts, right? There's no emotion one way or the other, no opinion one way or the other inserted into that sentence. It's just very objective and very matter of fact. But you can see, all 6 of those sentences are talking about the same exact apartment. But depending on what our purpose is, we have to be careful what language we use, our word choice. And each one of these creates a different tone and gives our readers a different impression each time. So tone can be super important. So the rhetorical situation, topic, angle, purpose, and then audience and tone as well. Really important to think about, again, before you even start writing. And these aren't necessarily elements that you have to spend, hours, thinking about. But just consider them, even if it's briefly, before you start writing something. But those first 3, you may need to spend a little more time because you need to make sure you have a very focused topic for whatever you're going to write. You probably want to make sure that you're bringing something unique to the table, that it represents you and that it's going to stand out. But then purpose. Topic and purpose, I think, are the 2 most important ones. Make sure you have a focused, manageable topic and make sure that you have a purpose for writing about it. Then see what you can do to make yours interesting and unique. Then see if you need to make any special considerations for your audience. Again, like I said, sometimes it's pretty obvious who we're writing for. But in different scenarios, it might need to be considered a little more thoroughly. And then think about what type of tone is appropriate for the situation and that helps advance your purpose, that helps you achieve that purpose. And don't forget that the writing process very rarely happens in a linear fashion. It doesn't, even though, we say there's however many steps to the writing process, there's 4 steps to the writing process, or there's 6 steps to the writing process. That implies that, you follow through the order, first step, second step, third step, and so on and so forth until you get to the finished product. But honestly, writing is much more messy than that, and it's recursive. So, you might get to step 4 or 5 and then realize that you need to change some things and you go back to step 1 or 2, and it's very messy, even for the most professional writers. Anyone who writes in a linear fashion is either not of this world or isn't necessarily producing high quality material. So just something to think about. Let the process be a process for you. All right. So that about wraps up our little introduction to writing. We're going to focus first on paragraphs and specifically to start off with the topic, sentence, and the support. And then we're going to look at some other elements that paragraphs need to have. We're going to start with the point and the support. And then, as we're going through all of this and you begin writing your own paragraphs and then the essay towards the end of the term, Don't forget about that rhetorical situation. All right. We're going to look also at pre-writing techniques that can help you kind of nail down those elements of the rhetorical situation. Um, because it is a journey, it is a process, and you do have to start somewhere, and it's better to start at the beginning and work your way towards that finished product instead of skipping steps and trying to jump right in. If you have any questions about chapter 1, please let me know. Otherwise, go ahead and move on to the PowerPoint and video on chapter 2.